Okay, so let's finish up our discussion of sexual victimization with sexual harassment, or as some people pronounce it, sexual harassment. I'm from the West Coast, so most of us say harassment. Anyway, the definitions of the different kinds of sexual harassment would be quid pro quo. It's kind of hard to see the quo in this picture, but it's quid pro quo, Q-U-O, which means this for that. In quid pro quo sexual harassment, you have, for example, let's say a boss who says, I'll give you a raise if you have sex with me, or I will fire you if you don't, or if you don't come on this trip with me, or something like that. So quid pro quo, I will give you this if you will give me that. In the hostile work environment, what you have is a person who's made to feel marginalized or made to feel bad because they're a different sex than the other people in the group. And so I've got this men-only picture. It's classically been women who are the victims of the hostile work environment, but men can be made to feel like outsiders in a group that's primarily women, or people of different sexual orientations can be made to feel marginalized, or transgender people can be made to feel marginalized. And so how that's affected is by, for example, if you're in a mostly men's field, and let's say they put up pictures of bikini model calendars and tell dirty jokes and stuff like that, so that the female employee feels isolated and targeted, then we're talking about a hostile work environment. What we're talking about is people being made to feel like because of their sex they are being chased out of their profession. Now here's a little joke about these two. The woman says, all the other women in the office are suing you for sexual harassment. Since you haven't sexually harassed me, I'm suing you for discrimination. These are the kinds of jokes that you often hear about sexual harassment that kind of imply that if you're attractive, you'll be victimized more than if you're not attractive, and that it's kind of flattering to be the source of sexual harassment. But what we're talking about is behaviors that make it difficult for a person to earn a living because of their sex, or because someone else finds them attractive for whatever reason. Sexual harassment, like rape, is usually not about sexual attraction, it's about power dynamics. And so with sexual harassment, you're usually talking about somebody who has some kind of authority over the victim, either hiring and firing decisions or grades or something like that. So in fact, let's talk about some of the laws about sexual harassment. This is from what's called the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and they've got their definition of sexual harassment. It used to be that only women could file sexual harassment lawsuits, but now it has become commonplace knowledge that it could be a man or a woman. You can be the harasser and the victim could both be the same sex. They could be mixed sex pairs, whatever. So the understanding of sexual harassment has really grown since about 1980s, when they really started trying to eliminate hostile work environments and quid pro quo situations. They've started to really expand the definition. One of the key things about sexual harassment laws is that it puts the onus on the employer to have done something once they've been notified. So if an employee tells their employer that a coworker or their supervisor or somebody has been harassing them either in a quid pro quo or hostile work environment sort of way, the employer has to document that they are taking steps to remedy the situation. If they don't, then the company's open to a lawsuit. Now, it's important to notice over here on the right where it says employer coverage, you have to have at least 15 employees at your place of employment in order for these laws to apply. So if you have a small shop, you definitely, the employer is not open to the kind of financial risks that a larger employer would be open to. So those are my definition, more employees, okay. Now there are time limits. A person needs to make their claim within 6 months. Some state laws extend that, but if you're a federal employee, you only have 45 days to contact an EEOC counselor if you have a grievance. So what they're trying to get rid of is people who stay silent and don't say anything for years and then file an EEOC sexual harassment lawsuit that the employer really can't defend themselves against because they don't have documentation because they didn't know anything was going wrong, and the accused perpetrator was unaware. I mean, one of the biggest things that people should walk away from this conversation with is if you feel like you're being victimized, especially in a hostile work environment, you have to say something, either directly to the person or to your supervisor if you want it to stop. What happens to the victim who's been sexually harassed? Well, a lot like the childhood sexual abuse that we talked about, because when you're in a position where somebody has power over you and you feel like you can't really do anything, it's going to lead to the same basic kinds of effects, right? So depression. There was a study of 1,000 people who had been harassed in their teens and early 20s, and they had increased depression by the time they reached their 30s. And many reported that they doubted themselves, they second-guessed the way that they handled it, they blamed themselves for the situation. Some people display post-traumatic stress disorder. This was a study of women who'd been in the military, and they found that those women who reported having been sexually harassed had higher rates of PTSD than women who didn't report having been sexually harassed. Blood pressure. In a study of 1,200 union workers in Boston, 23% reported that they had been sexually harassed, and then they found that those women who reported sexual harassment had higher blood pressure than those women who hadn't. Sleep problems. One theory on why victims oftentimes have sleep problems is because they engage in what we call rumination, which means they keep thinking about the situation, and there is no solution, so they're sort of stuck in a loop of just thinking about it over and over and over again. It might actually manifest itself in nightmares, where they just can't stop thinking about it even when they're asleep. Suicide rates. In a study of 1,000 Canadian high school students, 23% reported that they'd been sexually harassed. 15% of the harassed girls reported suicide attempts, compared to only 2% of the non-harassed girls. So now this isn't necessarily employee-employer type of harassment. This is between students or between students and teachers, and we're seeing these effects. And then neck pain. In a study of 4,000 Canadian women, those who reported having neck pain were 1.6 times as likely to have been harassed. Kind of an interesting tie-in, isn't it? So there are long-term effects, there are short-term effects that come from being victimized in a way that makes you feel helpless and like there's nothing that you can do to protect your job or to make the harassment stop. And so I think that's kind of the theme throughout this entire chapter, is that feeling like out of control can be harmful in the long run. So, all right, well, that's enough on this unhappy topic, and we will come back for, well, pretty much some other unhappy topics for the remaining chapters. All right.